Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Off the Hook with MattyD. You know, the winter has been a little rough for some. It's been cold in January. We've had a couple of warm spells. The river's running high, but we are watching the James. Who's we, you ask? Well, of course, it's me and Simon Valencia, because, Simone, we are at that point now where it's time to start thinking. We've talked about this. Shad and Stripers, you're booking trips. We're going to talk about that. But what are you waiting for? Just that magical water temperature?
Yeah, so usually, we're looking for the fishing to get really good downtown. We're looking for about 50 plus. 55 really lights them up, but 50 degrees, we start to have some action. 51, 52, 53, good action. The thing with those 51, 52, 53 degree days is that at night it's still dipping into the 40s, and that little change seems to do a number on those fish.
Keeps them down, is what you're saying?
Or slow.
Okay.
But once it hits 55 and it drops only to 50 at night, the river temperature, the water temperature itself at the surface, we start to see really good activity on shad. You know, a little bit of the way that the migration works as it pertains to us in Richmond is we start to see those big cow stripers late February, early March, depending on water temperatures, but they can handle a little bit colder water. Then the shad come in usually mid-March, fill in really thick by late March, and then are here through most of April. At the beginning of April, we start to see the schoolie stripers in high numbers and very active, and that goes until that water hits about 75 degrees.
And then it's just not good for the fish because you'd really tire them out and you stress them if you try to catch them.
Right, and they will stick around for a lot longer than that. It's just, checking that water temperature to be kind to the fish, I think, is a crucial thing when we're practicing catch and release.
You mentioned the big cow stripers. I mean, they're coming in, here we are, February 5th, so they're coming in a couple of weeks, could be depending on water temperature. But they're big for a reason. They're not the ones that are chasing little, minnows that we're throwing, and they say minnows is a joke, but, smaller, flies.
I think people are impressed by big fish because of the size, period. But I think the impressive thing is that in order for a fish to get that big, it also has to be smart. It has to know how to survive. It has to know it's a lot more wary and a lot brighter, usually, with the exception of a few species. But it's true for stripers, for sure. These guys have made you see a 50-inch striper in Richmond, which sometimes they shock them in the upper 40s, lower 50s, as far as inches go.
Right.
And they'll shock those.
And that's about getting a count for DWR and stuff like that.
Right. It's research.
Yeah.
It's about their migration, when they're coming in, how big, what the season looks like. But those guys are mostly females at that point. Only females get really that big. But those fish are fish that have made the migration from New England to Virginia now 15, 20 times.
Wow. Yeah.
They can live up to 30 years. So, and they begin to migrate around year 5 heavily. Of course, not all fish migrate at different, but
sure.
There's a lot of 1-year-old fish that actually make that migration, but most of them don't.
Right.
The big females come in early, and then impossible to get to chase almost anything. Not impossible, but it's a very tough ask to catch one on a fly. Bait is usually the better way to get
catch
those fish.
Bigger fish, right?
Yeah.
Right. All right. So February's here. And right now, you have a number of classes that are going on here. And just to kind of go through, and then we're going to get into something really kind of cool today. Let's talk about the classes. February 13th is your next fly tying class. I love that you do these. And it's not so much about the physical, let's do the class. It's about the camaraderie that comes along with it. I think that's something really cool because a lot of times I go out, I see you, I might see one other person, but then there's other people way down that I, don't walk a mile to go talk to. So this gives you that time to meet people and to form that relationship, to go out fishing.
Which I think, I've said it before and I'll say it a million times again, we have a really good excuse to make connections with our environment, connections with the fish, hopefully that compel us to conserve them and their environments, but also relationships with our community, other people who value this very simple thing. We look at the water and are like, yeah, that fish is cool. Let me tell you a story about that fish.
Right.
30 years old, migrates from New England, and it comes back to the river it was born. So in a way, it's just an admiration for the natural wonders that are around us that could be as simple as a fish. And I think that these social nights allow us to create bonds with each other and based on something really simple and something that we can all agree on, right?
Right.
You know, there's very little divisiveness about whether fish are cool.
Yeah.
Right.
No,
Like most people can agree, fish are cool.
Fish are cool. Whether you're chasing shad or stripers, redfish for you, steelhead for me, it doesn't. I mean, we can all. I want to try that. I mean, I went with you twice last year because I wanted to go after redfish, and I'll go with you 2 or 3 times this year. There's that camaraderie. There's the fish are cool aspect. So let's talk about fly tying here. I brought this up. This is going to be at the Triple Crossing in Midlothian.
That's
so
right.
if I'm not there, it's around the corner from my house. I better be there, right?
Yeah, so we have these fly tying nights that we're putting together that there is a 3-hour, 6 to 9 social portion of it.
Right.
Free to tie whatever you want, bring your own materials, bring your own vise. Just show up and don't talk to anybody and drink beer and eat pizza if that's what you want to do, just a change of pace. Or learn from the person next to you who's tying a fly that you've never seen before, or sit and tell fish stories, which you should never believe from an angler.
What are you saying? We all
well-
have fish stories?
Well, see, Matty, this is the thing. With catch and release fishing, when you release that fish that I caught last year that was this big, it's now this big, right? Like it just keeps getting bigger. So I can say that it just keeps getting bigger. So, and that's the beauty of catch and release fishing. There's a lot of good stories told and friends made. I know that from these nights, a lot of people, including myself, of course, have made good friends.
Yep.
That we have, gone fishing after. I know we have a friend in common that
Ron Binstock.
that you two have become
Good friends.
good friends from. I believe you met at a tying night.
We met at a time before that. We actually, passed each other on the river. Hi, how are you? That kind of a thing. But
Yeah.
but we've become closer tying night, and then of course, he came to the Salmon River with me, and I asked him a couple of weeks ago. I said, he goes, "I'm in. You don't even have to ask. I'm in." I'm like, "That's cool, right? Because that's what you want."
Yeah. No, it's and I'm excited to have you guys on the boat that day. I'm really looking.
Oh
forward
yeah,
to it.
we did. We booked a trip with you for
Yeah.
Shad Stripers, right? Because so I want people to know that we book with you and we pay you. There's no give-me's here, right? Because I don't want people to be like, yeah, Matt goes with Simone. No, I don't do things for free. You are putting work in. You get paid for your work. So
and
want
it's
people to.
so appreciated.
Right.
Our work is so seasonal, and
Right.
We get it when we can, and we really, it's not the easiest way to make a living. I
No.
used to have a comfortable office job with benefits and stuff, but we do it for the love, and we appreciate the support.
For sure, for sure.
It's very, very greatly appreciated. We do it because we love it.
Right, exactly.
We want to share. I tell this story many times. I was shad fishing with Reed, my business partner, and it was like, we need to share this. Like, this is like we need to show people how cool this is. And we were on a little Carolina skiff without a bilge pump, with water to our ankles, and we were like, this is what we need to do. Like, we're just laughing and having a good time, and it comes back to those connections that we make. And
Right.
Reed has become like a brother to me.
And you found such an area that needed you and Reed, and others as well, right? Because you have a lot of people in your arsenal. The James River downtown, the Chickahominy, we talk about this all the time. Every river here, 5, 10 minutes, half-hour drive, a plethora of fish, but nobody was really guiding on them. So you offered an opportunity to expand what's going on here.
Yeah.
And I think that's great.
It's always odd to me that people didn't see a lot of our rivers as viable fly fishing rivers, especially the tidal sections. They do present some difficulties. For example, you can't get around without a boat or a kayak or a canoe or something floating,
Yeah.
because they get deep, silty, tidal, right?
Yep.
So we wanted to offer that. But the big thing for us is like we want to share this with people because it's just something that I think people need to experience at least once in their life. You can decide it's not for you, but you won't regret it.
Right. Speaking of sharing, I'm going to go back to the thing here. So we're sharing about learning, and whether you've tied flies for years like me or you've never tied before, there is a beginner's portion fly tying. Speak a little bit about that so people know, I've always wanted to try, but I'm really not sure how to get into this. Do they need to have a vise, a tools, a bobbin, all that kind of stuff?
We save 6 spots for beginners who want to do a class, who want to show up, never have tied before, and walk out with a fly that they can go throw and catch fish with. That usually takes about an hour, if I'm being honest, more like an hour 20 to get done. But after that, we do that right at 6 when we get there. Social tires get there at the same time. They have their own tables.
Yep.
We have our own table. If you're doing a class, you sit with me, and I walk you through a fly beginning to end, providing materials, vise, tools, everything you need. You don't need to bring anything. We charge $20 for the class. That includes every bit of material that you need, and you get to take your fly home as well.
Right.
So a little pricier than the cost of the fly, but you leave with the know-how. So.
And I'll say this straight out. You tie a fly once, even if it's a simple fly. And by the way, this is one of the cool things we're going to do today. We're going to talk about tying flies. We're actually going to tie a couple here in this episode. If you tie, let's say, a shad dart, one thing we're going to fly, it's repetitive. And so you do it once, you do it again. Next thing you know, an hour has passed at your home, and you now have 20 shad darts because they're a simple tie. Other ties are more intricate. If you're trying a size 16 trico, good luck. Get glasses.
Or even a game changer,
Right.
there's...
So,
It can be very simple and very effective, and we're going to go through 2 very simple, very effective flies today.
Right.
And it can be very complicated and an art, right?
Right, for sure. Yeah, when I was at one of your fly tying, you tied the shrimp pattern that we used. You wouldn't let me use mine because it was ugly. That's fine, I get it. But the point is, there was a number of steps involved in that, and I crowded the head too much. And there's some things you need to learn when tying a fly, but it is really fun, and it's therapeutic as well. We talked about this off the air.
Yeah.
You like to just have comedy on,
Yeah.
a comedian, when you're tying flies.
It's a must for me. I need to have something funny on the background, and I'm just enjoying hearing it. I have to tie.
Right.
I have to tie a lot because I'm very particular about the flies that I want to throw, partly because I'm very confident in them, and partly because I think about them a lot, so I can't really buy them.
Right.
You can't buy that shrimp that we tied. It doesn't exist. And that's a pattern that has not let me down, right? So it's just something, I put like 20 different redfish patterns together to make this one, and it's the one that I believe, and 90% of the fish that we've ever caught on my boat have been with that fly. So I got creative, informed by other tires, and I put something that is mine, that I trust and believe in, that I've put to, through the tests, and
Right.
It's my fly. It's, this is what I want to use. So you can get very particular if you tie your own versus if you're buying flies. You're limited to what they have available.
Correct.
When you're tying them, you can think about water clarity. You can think about how much sun do we have today? How are the fish acting? The speed of your retrieve, and you can make those adjustments with the fly to get the results that you're looking for in that specific piece of water. So I think tying is awesome. I enjoy it a lot.
Yeah.
I take pride in my tying. I admire tires, I'll be on
Instagram
social
or
media
something.
just looking at amazing tires that probably will never fish these flies, but you just look at them and they're like
they
they're just
are
hiding.
perfect replicas of whatever insect or something that they're, for
Yeah.
sure. And I know quite a few of them. Yeah, right.
You know, I think these days I'm more interested in like something that is not even realistic, just something that someone got into that fish's head and it's like, well, this is not a crab or a shrimp or a bait fish. It's kind of like all, but it looks like something the fish should eat because I'm familiar with this fish enough and I've gotten into their brain.
Right.
And I know about sun reflection and I know about water clarity, and they go deep and you're just like, oh, that's really cool. I had never thought about approaching colors this
That way, right? Because of the
And-
water clarity makes a huge difference in
Oh, yeah.
colors. Yeah, for sure. And whether it's a cloudy, overcast day or the sun's out.
Right.
Yeah, could be shades.
But I think I admire this one very amazing fly tyer out of South Carolina, Luke Panzarella, and he's just absolute, like the things he's doing with flies. I'm just, especially saltwater flies, which is
Right.
where my heart is.
Of course.
Is just incredible. I mean, the ties are perfection, and the thought behind them is also phenomenal.
Gotcha.
I mean, I admire particular fly tyers just because they
They
tie well.
tie, right? Yeah.
They know what they're doing. So the history of fly tying on its own is fascinating. You know, like what does a salmon eat, Maddie?
Mostly it eats either smaller bait fish when it's in the lake, or then it eats a lot of roe when it comes in.
Right. It doesn't have to be super complicated.
No, not complicated at all.
If you look back at Victorian salmon fly tyers, they were decimating species in the rainforest in Central and South America to tie their flies for art, right? Like just to show their
that-
friends.
Yeah.
For salmon, a fish that's striking mostly out of anger in these
all out of anger.
situations. And they were going out of their way to tie with birds of paradise and rare cotingas just for the sake of art at that point.
I will tell you, 99% of the salmon steelhead flies I tie take less than 2 minutes apiece. It's all some sort of egg pattern because I know that's what they're keying in on, right? I mean, I know when I go, I know what it's going for, right? I don't have to go crazy.
Where it is, it seems to be more important than what it is, right? With fish that strike out of aggression.
Correct. Yeah, absolutely.
And that's true for shad as well.
Right, because
Where
you said
it
they
is.
are striking out of aggression.
Yeah.
Yep.
So it's also true for shad, and we're going to talk a little bit about how we achieve that.
Right.
But yeah, if anyone's ever interested in an amazing, amazing story, there's a book called The Feather Thief. And it is, I'm not going to give it away too much.
Sure.
But if you want to read about something absolutely ridiculous regarding fly tying, I'll give you the brief synopsis. It's a kid who stole 299 species from the Museum of Natural History in London to sell to Victorian art-style salmon fly tyers
Just
less
so
than
they can
20
have
years, about 20 years ago, to sell for $1 million because on eBay, because he wanted to buy a flute made of gold, I believe.
Wow.
It's just, I mean,
It's called the Feather Thief?
The Feather Thief.
I
It's
have
an
to check this
amazing
out.
story. Amazing story. People go pretty far into fly tying.
Yeah, for sure.
And I know a lot of people who tie a whole lot more than they fish. And that's
It's sad.
awesome.
I mean, to me, it's sad because I want to have. I don't have to catch fish, but I want to complete the journey of I tied this to let me throw this, right?
Oh, that's also incredibly satisfying, right? I taught a beginner's class this weekend, and someone made the comment like, "It's going to be really rewarding if I catch something on this." And I'm like, "Don't count on it. You'll probably lose it before you catch something on it. Tie 2 or 3 more." But yeah, the fact is that when you catch something on something you tied,
Right.
is you are taking a bunch of feathers, putting them together in a way that makes sense, in some odd ways, going on this journey to catch a fish with something that you conceived 2 nights before while watching a comedy special on your couch. So to me, that's cool.
It
right?
is very cool.
That's a cool experience. People, and it goes the same way. I have a good friend who makes lures, And I went to his shop the other day, and he showed me some of the swim baits he's been making for muskie. It looks amazing.
Yeah.
And he says every fish I've caught on this is 20 times more rewarding than the ones from
From the store.
That's right.
Exactly. Yeah.
So it's super cool.
All right, let's get back to this really quick, and then we want to get to on February 15th, which is 1 week from this Sunday, if I'm right. Is that right? Yeah. No, Saturday. You are running an intermediate group casting clinic, so you want to have at least some basics and some basic knowledge of casting a rod before you go to the intermediate. As you said, you did a beginner class about a week ago.
Yeah.
So
the intermediate class, it's actually full.
Okay.
It filled up yesterday.
Okay.
But we will do another one. It is to get more distance and more accuracy and work less hard, right? So we want to perfect a lot of little things, like the most basic things, and then move on to more advanced techniques that make your cast go a lot further and a lot more accurate with a lot less work.
Another fly tying class coming up on the 20th. This one will be at Triple Crossing in Fulton. Then March 1st and 2nd, noon to 4 p.m. Beginners Fly Fishing Comprehensive. Are there spots still available for this? And let's talk about that.
The class size is of 6. There are 4 spots available. I announced it yesterday.
Okay.
We cover, through the 2 days, we cover what I think is everything a person needs to go from never have seen a fly rod to find success on the water. We focus on local water. So the first day, what we do is an introduction of like history and physics. Quite a bit. I mean, it really is like school.
Right.
History and physics of fly casting. Then we actually get rods in our hands, and we break down like line size, rod weights, that kind of stuff, so that people know what the difference is.
That's very important, because you can really mismanage what you're throwing, how things, because a fly rod is paired to a specific line that allows you to throw a specific size fly. So if you want to throw bigger flies for stripers, you can't use a very thin rod, because it's just not going to happen.
Yeah, the physics don't add up, and we could spend hours talking about exactly that, but we dig deep, and that's exactly what this is. We dig deep for hours, and we end the day actually fly casting with coaching. So you'll have an idea of what it is that you need to do, or what the goal, how it all functions.
Okay.
And then we go and I always say your brain's way smarter than your body. And then we go and try to put the pieces together with our bodies. It's like learning to dance, right? So you have to see someone dance. You have to hear about what it is that they're doing with their body. If I do a dance without practicing, I look silly.
So look like me. Got it, right.
But if I practice a dance, I can get there. So then, and if I know what a dance is and what it looks like, I can get there, right? So it's kind of that idea. So we start with very theoretical stuff and understanding what we are handling as a tool. And then we go on and cast. The second day, we break down catch and release fishing technique, like what it is that we need to do to do effective catch and release fishing, fish handling, etc. Then we proceed to talk about striped bass and shad, techniques to target them, access points, reading gauges for safety, reading tides, because both of those affect our area, tide and river gauge. We talk about summer smallmouth and largemouth fishing, which are also easily available to all of us, and we end with fly tying. So it's a very, very cool, comprehensive class that is going to allow you, and while fly tying, we talk about color theory, depth. We break all of these things down. We talk about line weights, line depth, sinking rates. We talk about all of this stuff in the class. So you walk out with a class, an understanding of where the fish are going to be through the seasons, what it is that they're feeding on, and what flies you need to throw. And you can fish year round now, right? All of a sudden, like, doors really open up.
Right. It makes it.
So it's a steep learning curve. I always say with the difference between spin fishing and fly fishing is the learning curve is a little steeper with fly fishing,
Yep.
but once you're there,
You understand. You don't understand it all, but you have the basics to take you to wherever you want to go.
right. And,
yeah.
you know, the learning never ends. There's not a day that I've spent on the water that I
Yeah,
haven't
no,
learned something.
Absolutely, for sure.
But yeah, it allows you to move forward. And if you want to come back for private instruction or we have this one guy who came to one of these classes a couple of years ago, and he books a lot of private instruction, and he's gone from what I call having spin roditis to having a near perfect cast, right? So it's very, very, very exciting to see that kind of growth.
Later in April, you have another class. It's the on-site striper and shad fishing class, April 19th, 1 to 9. Full day openings in this class, or is this booked?
Announced yesterday.
Okay, good.
We've only had one person sign up.
Okay.
So 5 seats open. That's going to be 3 boats on the water, half day of instruction, half day of guided trip. So we will run through in depth of the flies we're throwing at every point in the season, of the colors we're throwing at every point. This is not a beginner's class. We expect people to come in with the ability to already cast. Because there's a lot to cover and we don't have a lot of time, it really is for the angler who probably has fished a bit or some and wants to try this kind of fishing. We end the day on motorboats, roaming around the downtown section of the James River, catching fish till dark.
This is pretty much like your saltwater class that you do in the fall. It's kind of a smaller version of it in the James, right here local.
That's it. And and we put 3 guys. We have the reason we do 6 people is because we have 3 boats, 3 guides working it.
Right.
And we have parties of 2 on each boat. If you want to pair up with somebody to get a boat on your own, that's great. If you just want to come in on your own, we'll pair you with someone. We have never had anyone who we have not absolutely loved on these classes.
For sure.
The crowd that comes to these classes, everyone's on the same mindset, so it's always really pleasant.
That's awesome.
I love these classes. The saltwater class is probably our highest demand class that we do, and because of it, we have also done a trout class in the same format, and now we're doing the striper and shad class in the same format. So that is.
I was just highlighting the saltwater classes for those that want to know, October 19th and 26th, and those book up really fast, I know from talking to you.
Already booked a few.
Already booked a few. And the striper class, shad fishing, April 19th, just to go through. And of course, the panfish tournament, biggest, smallest, most fun, best tournament probably in the area by far.
A guy who runs some of these big tournaments reached out to me. He's like, just don't attach a dollar amount to anything.
Right,
and it'll be fun.
Yeah.
Otherwise, the worst of people will come out. And I was like, exactly what we wanted to do out of this. We're not giving cash prizes, but the prizes are good.
Yep.
Guided shad and striper trip was the winner last year. Smallest fish does get a prize, and it's musky fly, usually 8 times the size of the fish they catch.
So classic.
It's goofy, but it's a lot of fun. Either I or Reed or somebody or Austin will tie those flies for us for the prize. So these musky flies are really expensive, but it's not that. It's I think the joke
of the whole thing, right?
Of like you caught a fish that's an eighth of this. That's an eighth of the size of this fly.
Right, exactly. Before we get going, so here we are on the James with some clients going for stripers and shad. And the reason why I bring this up, of course, because as we said at the beginning, we are very close to the start of this season. I know exactly where all these places are because I see you there, and it is so much fun. So with that, Simone, you were so gracious enough. What we did today was we brought in, and double shot there, of Simone and his vise. And we're going to be tying. Now, you have told me these are simple flies to tie and ones that are effective patterns. Because the worst thing to do is to tie a pattern that's just useless. Yep. So we want people to be successful by learning. So I appreciate the time. I'll bring that back up there and tell me what we're going to be tying, what we're going through here.
The first one is going to be the shad dart that I like to tie the most. This is a size 6 Arex freshwater 550. It's got a steep 60-degree jig angle and a wide gap that allows those fish to hook on. You can see the size of it is it's relatively small, right? We're talking about an inch here.
Yeah.
And because shad strike out of aggression, we want to make this thing very bright, right? So I'm going to start with my chartreuse thread. I like thicker thread. 210 denier is crucial for this. It's not a delicate tie. It's not a super small tie. It's small for me, but it's not like compared to some of the really technical small stuff that you're counting a lot of wraps that you do. Both of these flies are going to be very forgiving. You make a mistake, go at it again.
Doesn't make a difference, right?
So again, super effective. The color combination that I use here is my favorite for shad, and it is chartreuse and pink. Very few materials. We have a hook, we have our thread, we got an extra small or small.
It's a dumbbell eye set, yeah. Now, are you using, is that a lead dumbbell eye, Simone? Yeah, it is.
Or you can go tungsten.
Okay.
But I think heavier is better to achieve the jigging action that we're looking for, which is why I use the jig hook.
And so just to kind of reset here for a second, when you're shad fishing, you're using a full sink tip line.
Full sink.
So, right, not intermediate, it's a full sink, so we're getting down, and then the tungsten is getting it down even further. So we're dropping quick.
The idea is that we need to, because the current flows so fast, especially on an outgoing tide, that in order for us to get down to where the fish are, we need weight. The second thing is there is the thought, right? There's a lot of thoughts behind shad, but there is the thought that shad are striking to protect their eggs from egg-eating size stuff,
right?
Like this,
okay,
that are diving to the bottom where the eggs are gonna fall eventually.
Gotcha.
And because of that, I put a heavy head so that fly in between my strips drops steep. The jig hook with the weight on this side is also going to keep that hook riding up because the weight is going to be on this side of the hook. It's going to keep it riding up, and we're fishing around a lot of rocks and a lot of stuff that if that hook is down, I'm going to get hung up a lot more than if that hook is turned up.
And we lose a number of flies anyway, so let's try to lose at least one or two less.
Minimize, right? So we want something that's heavy enough to flip that fly.
Got it.
I'm going to start by tying my thread up here towards the top. I just do a couple of wraps while holding on to it. Again, we go into the details of why I'm doing it, everything that I'm doing in these classes.
Whether it's the fly tying class or the beginner fly fishing class, you're going through all of this at that point.
Like I just said, I set my thread here. We break down how to set your thread, right? So I want to keep it moving for a demo and get some information out, but I don't want to get too deep into and end up with a 4-hour program. I'm going to take these eyes.
Although I would sit here for 4 hours with you in a heartbeat.
We might. We just might. You got to work later?
I'm done.
Oh.
This is my work.
All right. So now I'm setting my eyes here. I set my eyes the way Bob Clouser likes to set his eyes, which is a couple of X-wraps to get those eyes looking straight. And what we do after...
You go front and back.
Front and back.
To lock them in so they don't shift?
Well, if you see here, I'm creating a little bit of like a canopy shape over the eye. You see how that's kind of V'ing out? I'm coming around, a loop around the hook and over the eye to create some distance. What that does is it spreads the pressure out a little bit, right? And then I can come underneath the eye and tighten that up. Right. That makes those eyes not turn when I put pressure on them. These are turning a little bit, but I'm putting a good amount of pressure that they'll never see if I'm just fishing them. Then I'm going to come down the hook shank to the beginning of the bend back here, and I'm going to put a piece of fluorescent pink marabou, right, like that. And I'm just putting the tip of it, right? I'm going to cut off all of this. So I just do a couple of wraps there. Snip. A little bit of flash. right?
So you're putting flash into the marabou tail.
That's right.
Okay.
Just a little bit of flash. It doesn't have to be a lot. A little bit goes a very long way. So I need to make that even. A little bit of flash. Tie it in. I like to double over the flash so that I can just flip it back and make less cuts that are inaccurate and just make less accurate cuts, but you can make as many cuts as you want.
And when you're tying this, Simone, I mean, we're going slow right now. In a standard day, you'd be tying this super quick.
Very quick, yeah.
Yeah.
Very quick. I can do this fly in about 2 minutes.
Yeah.
And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab this little bit of...
Is that Estes?
It's Estes. It's an extra small Estes.
So you like the Estes over the chenille because there's more flesh in the Estes. More flash, I should say.
But I will say this, both work great.
Okay.
As long as the colors are right and they can see them and it's in their line of sight, we're going to do great. The main thing that I'm looking for in a shad dart is that it dives head first, heavy, quick, and is extra, extra, extra bright. That's the big thing for me.
Right.
So I'm palmering this up to the eyes, and then I'm going to turn it around the eyes. Boom, boom, and one lap around here, and I'm going to set that in place. And we are pretty much there.
Yeah.
Right? It's not a particularly complicated fly, but this is how I like to tie them and how I tie them for guiding. And it's how I like to tie them. I have a few other methods, but in my box I have black and chartreuse and pink and chartreuse. And those are the two colors that I pretty much get away the whole season using.
So pretty much as long as chartreuse is included, you have high confidence.
It just needs to be real bright. I use the black and chartreuse for muddier days.
Okay.
And that's pretty much what it is. But if the water is relatively clear, the pink and chartreuse works great. It doesn't even have to be very clear, just relatively clear. If we're fishing a mud fest,
like we have right now.
I would be throwing black and chartreuse.
Gotcha. Okay.
But that's all this is. This is going to ride hook up. You see how wide that gap is here, right? Which is going to allow those fish to hook. And it's going to, because of the way the hook is angled here, the jig is going to have this action. So it's going to dive and rise, and rise. And I think that triggers more strikes.
And I noticed now, in this tie, you didn't use cement for the top head. Do you use cement or do you not care?
I do.
Okay.
If I believe that I'm going to keep the fly for more than a couple of days, which I don't.
Right. Otherwise, it's just yeah,
I mean, these guys, when the season's going on and we're running, 8 hours a day, 2 trips a day, 4 anglers, 5 anglers a day, we lose
so many flies.
A good amount.
Yeah.
But if you want it to be durable, use head cement. I am partial to head cement over UV glue.
Yep.
But you can use whatever you'd like. Super glue works great. It's not there's no
right, wrong way. It's whatever you feel comfortable with in that respect.
I will say something that penetrates the threads, that stays wet for longer, is gonna keep it harder, right? It's gonna create a harder grab on it. But UV glue will chip off. You'd have to reapply.
Gotcha.
Because it coats the threads rather than penetrates the threads and holds them together. So,
what are we tying next?
I'm gonna go with a Klauser minnow, man. Klauser minnow. So, for striped bass, I use a 2/0 Klauser minnow. Now, early in the season, there's one fly I prefer over this one.
Okay.
And one only, and that's Lefty's Deceiver. But when the fish are moving a little more aggressively, when the water bumps up above 60, 65, and there's a lot of movement in the water, these fish become more willing to chase because they have to, right? If they want to eat, they have to chase. The panfish are awake. The bass are awake. The shad are awake. Everything's moving. This fly works better that later part of the season. So usually early in the season, if we're talking like early to mid-April, and I'm targeting striped bass, I will throw a bigger, slower sinking fly.
Gotcha.
That I can suspend in place and pause longer and allow those fish to catch up. This is, frankly, the one that I use the most because at that point we're still heavy on shad and the striper's kind of like a bonus, but it is very effective. So I forgot my bobbin threader.
Oh, I have one over to the side. If you can't grab it, I'll grab it for you.
I got it.
Okay.
Yeah, that'll do. So
All the tricks of pulling a thread through a bob.
don't do these on my class ones. I don't know how many lips have been on them,
Right, yeah.
but these are mine.
So what size hook are we using? You said a 2-aught?
A 2-aught, and I really like the Mustad Alpha Point saltwater curved streamer hook, which is what this is. Nice wide gap. I can fit my whole index finger in there.
Okay.
And what I really like about this hook is the barb, which can you see it on there?
It looks like it's a flat barb. It's not right. So it's barbless.
There's a barb.
Is there barb there? Okay.
But it's so minimal.
Okay. Yeah.
It's enough to help us keep that fish on
without having to really pry it backward to get it out.
This is a gentleman's hook.
Got it.
Right. This is a very kind hook to the fish. If you don't want to go fully barbless, but you still want to do as little damage as possible, I think this is a really good way to go. We do pinch. The other beautiful thing about this hook is that when we do get a few fish on the boat, it's so easy to pinch.
Pinch down. So yeah.
Some of these bigger hooks have these very aggressive, I'll show you one, have these very aggressive barbs that are a little harder to pinch, like this one.
Yep. I see. Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Right.
Used to seeing that, right? That standard heavy.
There.
Yep.
That's it.
Yeah.
But I really like this hook a lot. And it's a hook in a smaller size that I use for most of my redfish flies as well.
Gotcha.
I like to use it in a 4 for my redfish flies,
Okay.
2-aught for stripers. So we're going to set those eyes the same way we did before. I see two big consistent issues with tying Clouser minnows, which is what I'm tying. One is crowding the head. So we really want to
Back off of that.
Right, so break that shank that you have here into thirds. The eyes go in at the end of the first third from the hook eye to the hook shank, right? So right where we're at.
Okay.
Then I'm gonna grab my eyes, which I had handy and ready. I'm gonna steal one of yours, Matty.
That's fine. Go ahead. There should be a whole thing there.
If you told me, hey man, you can only use one fly to fish the rest of your life, I get to pick sizes and colors, right? Like a variety.
Yep.
There would be no question in my mind that it would be this pattern, a Clouser minnow.
Just because it is so universal to anything salt, which is your love.
Or pretty much anything outside of trout.
Oh, okay.
Now, if you were to tie Clouser minnow, I have caught trout on Clouser minnows. But I don't recommend it, but it is doable. If you were to tie on a long shank hook, like a 4X hook,
Yep.
and put that hook on the back end of the fly, it can work really well as a trout streamer as well.
Gotcha.
Not ideal, but
Right,
it can work.
it can work.
I can do just about anything on Clouser minnows. There's nothing a Clouser minnow can't do. I'm convinced of that. So I'm going to set the eyes the same exact way I set the previous eyes.
So again, you're doing an X pattern over the eyes, and then you're going to go X pattern wrapping in front to build up kind of a
little canopy shape.
canopy shape, yeah. And then you're going to wrap it underneath to really lock it in so that our eyes aren't shifting, which is a really nice technique because I think that's one area that I don't do is I always forget to wrap around underneath, and I'll let people see what we're talking about here in just a second.
You see that little, that shape
yeah.
of the thread that's coming off to the sides like this?
Yep.
I like to tie like this. I wouldn't say that this is the right way to do it, but this is the way that I do it, and it works really well for me. So then I can put a little pressure underneath the eye
Yeah.
and really clamp down on that eye to the point where, I mean, if you were to touch this, Matty,
It's not moving at all.
It's not moving at
Right.
all. So yes, it's a couple more steps, but it's gonna make this fly last a little longer, ride the sideway, the correct way.
But you know, the couple extra steps was 10 more seconds.
Right.
We're not talking about, you know, putting turkey biots on and all that kind of stuff, you know.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Correct. Yeah, it's in the grand scheme of things, it's not the hardest thing.
Right,
to do.
exactly. All right, so now you're grabbing, it looks like some sort of rabbit fur, or?
This is bucktail.
Bucktail, okay.
So this is just bucktail. And I'm grabbing a small clump. The second mistake I see a lot after crowding the eye is too much material. So we're grabbing a small amount that when you put it like this and like tighten it up, it should be as thick as the lead in a pencil.
Okay.
And then I'm just gonna tie this portion right at the head, right here. Right?
Mm-hmm.
This fly's cool because you get to give it a slick back haircut, which
Who doesn't want that?
yeah,
Yeah.
it's just
That's,
cool.
that's what I have. I have a slick back haircut.
There you go.
Minus the part that's missing.
So then we want to lay this bucktail down, right, over
Right.
the eye. That's his haircut right there. We don't want to cross over the eye. We want to cross on the hook side of the eye rather than the shank side of the eye.
Got it.
And that's going to set us up for success. What we do is we now cover the shank as far back as you want to. I've seen people tie it shorter. I've seen people tie it longer. But at the end of the day, to me, it's a bucktail on a shank, on a hook, and that's just a recipe for success. The way bucktail moves in the water is kind of mesmerizing. I cut off all my excess here to make it easy to finish later, and I cut as I go.
So just trimming it around the eye or the front part there. Is what
Right,
you're
because I
doing.
don't really want to finish with a bunch of hair ahead of the
Gotcha.
of the head, and it's a lot easier to trim as I go than it is to trim after.
Gotcha.
Like I've tied a whole bunch of stuff. It just keeps it more manageable as I tie. So what I'm gonna do is I have two strands. These guys are about twice the length of my fly.
Mm-hmm.
So what I'd like to do, and again, this is how I do this. There's probably 20 different ways to set these.
Now you're
But
tying that in ahead of the tungsten eyelets there.
underneath.
But meaning in front of that, and then you're bringing it back.
Right, so I have half in front, half in the back. This allows me, for my method when I'm trying to tie quick, it allows me to just simply flip this onto the other side
Mm-hmm.
and do an X-wrap underneath, and that's gonna hold that there.
Got it.
I cut my excess at about the size of my fly, all of them,
I'm making you go quick. That's why.
and I then take my second color, which in this case is gonna be chartreuse. I use a lot of chartreuse in the spring.
And is that more because of light conditions? Like, you know, we're getting light, and when we're fishing for stripers, we're fishing either dawn or dusk for our best action. So a brighter fly, seeable in lower light conditions?
Yeah, it's a couple of things mixed, right? So one of them is that stripers aren't picky. So if they can see it,
They'll
they'll
stripe.
probably eat it. The second reason, and it just seems to be really effective to cut, the light frequency that it reflects can be seen a long ways away, and these are fish that actually chase, right? So they'll actually make moves on your fly and come from a ways rather than like with a redfish fly that I use very subtle colors, tans, browns, olives, where I'm putting it in front of the fish and trying to get him to not deny it. So the technique is, like the idea behind how we're fishing is completely different. So I use a lot brighter colors like chartreuse.
And again, a lot of things that you talk about in your Shad Striper course coming up on April 19th.
Right.
Yeah.
It's the selection of these colors. That being said, black and purple is the color that I use the most while striper fishing.
Interesting.
Because of that night.
Night.
The fish are looking, striper like to feed on what they see above them,
you.
just above them. And when you contrast the purple night sky, especially with like light pollution from the city, again, and you don't have a lot of light coming in, there's not a lot of light for a fly like this to reflect. If you put a white fly against a white sky, it disappears.
Blends in, right.
If you put a black fly against a black sky, it pops. We have to, I think that it's crucial to remember that fish are looking
upward.
We're looking at them this way. So if we can't see it looking down, that doesn't mean, like, the perspective is completely different.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean they can't see it.
Right.
Of course, I've heard the flip side to all of this. I want to capture as much light. There's never zero light. I want to capture as much light and reflect as much light as I possibly can. And like, that's my good friend Wayne McMasters. He wants to, or Mike Rennie, like people who I respect that I know catch a lot of fish. A lot of choosing a fly or tying a fly is one that you have confidence in.
Mm-hmm.
The water will reward you in certain days, on certain ways, and you'll develop habits, right? So I don't blame, if they found success with that. I know that it works because I've seen it work. But when I have control over these decisions, I'm making decisions that have rewarded me, not them.
Right. And I see right here what you're doing is you're starting to put a cone on the top of the fly.
Right. I'm just cleaning up here.
Yep.
Essentially, that's all I'm doing. And then you just finish. You whip finish. That's all there is to it. You set your eye, put your first color of bucktail,
Mm-hmm.
which this fly, because the way it is on this side, is also gonna attempt to ride hook up. So I use a lighter color for the belly because that's also how fish are. This is also another going back to that idea of colors. Bass, largemouth bass.
Yep. The color's all on top. You hold them up. The underside is silver white.
And it's a camouflage thing. So you kind of want the opposite of that
Right.
in certain situations, and then
Yeah.
you want to mimic that in certain situations. So in the situations where I want to throw something more natural, by the way, not a lot of fish see, or if any, I'm not 100% on the science, but they don't see this as chartreuse. They see it as some sort of shiny silver thing. They don't detect a lot of
The physical color that we see having greens or purples or oranges, they see more shades or different types of, right, yeah.
It's a little more grayscale for
Yeah.
them. They do perceive colors, but I think it's more important that they perceive the light frequency, the reflection.
Gotcha.
And this is very reflective. So this is going to be a shiny back in many ways, is all it is. It's not actually this color in their eyes, but they're going to be able to see that a ways away because that light frequency is very reflective. Again, if I believe that we're going to keep this fly for more than a couple of days,
Not stuck on some tree across the way that you've,
or some rock at the bottom, I do
do a little glue just to
just
keep
head
it tight.
cement.
Yep.
And call it a day. And that's two. If I had to choose two flies to fish the entire spring season with, it would be
Clouser minnow and the shad dart using chartreuse and pink,
But again,
based on water, based on conditions.
and also based on confidence.
Right.
I know a lot of people who swear by orange and yellow, and in my head, when it comes to shad, that's the same thing.
Right.
It's annoyingly bright. We're going for obnoxious for shad. For striped bass, we're going for something that looks a little more realistic, but they're not particularly picky. If it's moving, these are fish that are throughout the year eating dozens of different types of forage. So they're not, if it's moving, it's food.
Gotcha.
For them. They're not picky. So those are the two flies that I like to tied simply. Again, this is also a 3-minute fly to tie if
Right.
I'm sitting at home and I really need to be tying more of these right now. So super simple. Those are the two flies. I think different colors are crucial on the clouser. If I had to pick two colors, it would probably be this chartreuse and white and black and purple to have the daytime, nighttime,
Right.
clear water, dark water. Or, and if I had to add another one, I would probably do like an olive and yellow
Gotcha.
to hit that middle zone.
Gotcha.
And with shad, less important, I think.
Just
than-
the real importance is the jig head so that it drops and has the action in the water. And you said they're striking out of aggression to hit. And yeah,
I think it's not that a weightless shad dart is not going to trigger them. I think that this just triggers them harder.
right.
And again, this is feedback that I get from the fish. And
By catching them day in and day out. And yeah,
it's not necessarily, I don't know how much science there is to it. And if you find a better way, please let me know. This is the best way I know how to do.
very good. Simone, one more time, I'm going to just run through. Again, you can go to Current Culture Fly. You can set up for the classes. Again, don't forget the fly tying is coming up on February 13th. Guide services, please. You want to reach out to Simone or to Reed or to just about everybody. Book it. Have fun. Captain Keegan Lemke. There's so much going on. Don't forget about redfish coming up this summer. I promise you, you will never see a person work harder. I mean that, on a boat to put you into fish.
I appreciate that. I try.
Yeah, you do. And Simone, thank you for coming in, doing the fly tying. I think this is a great way, and I will see you on the 13th. And I look forward to tying
It's
with
going to be a blast.
It's going to be great.
Looking forward to pizza.
I'll buy you your first pizza and beer. It's on me because you helped me out again.
I'm in.
Very good. Once again, this has been Off the Hook with MattyD. My guest has been Captain Simon Valencia, and I hope you guys start tying because before you know it, guess what's coming up? That's right, you got it. It's Shad and Striper season. I'll see you on the James for that. Have a great day, everyone. Thanks for joining us for another episode of Off the Hook with MattyD.